Good morning, everyone. This is Jeffe Kennedy, author of Epic Fantasy Romance. I'm here with kind of my first cup of coffee. Ah, I'll explain. Today is, say it with me, it is Friday, woohoo, June 14th. And yeah, here I am doing podcast a little bit later in the day. I had to take one of the cats into the vet early for procedure, and so I tried to go yesterday, and things happened. Um, I guess I might as well tell the whole story because like it's one thing after another with the cats, right? Cats will happen, as one of you pointed out to me. Was it's like a message of my podcast, which I find really amusing. Um, that yeah, I suppose that is like a Zen karmic thing, is that cats will happen. So poor Killian, who got neutered a few weeks ago, uh, developed swelling on his ear. And I'd never had a cat had this before. It was like a clear blister, and I thought it was like a mosquito bite or from a cactus spine. Well, it turns out it's what's called an ear hematoma in cats. I Googled it and then took him into the vet for verification. And it does kind of heal on its own, but it like gets inside the cartilage of the ear, and if it heals on its own, they end up with like a crumpled up cauliflower ear, like boxers get. Um, and I didn't feel like I could let him do that. It wasn't terribly sensitive, but he didn't like it. It was making his ear fall in half, and I thought that it would, like the clear fluid, it would just drain, but it apparently doesn't drain on its own, and it'd start to darken, and all of this. So anyway, I had tried to take him in yesterday morning, and this new vet, Smith Vet here in Santa Fe, who I really do like, and I left them a really nice review and everything. They don't do appointments, which is great because, like, if I try to call one of the vets we've gone to before, they're like, oh, 2 weeks for an appointment. So Smith Vet, you don't need an appointment, but you do have to wait. You just go in and you get in the queue. So yesterday morning, they opened at 7:30. And I'm an early riser, as you all know. So I thought, well, yesterday morning I would go in, and I was supposed to meet Jim Sorensen for writer coffee at 9. And I thought, well, I'll go in and get this done and be done in plenty of time. So I get there, and it was my fault, reader. I did not get there by 7:30. I got there at like 7:45, and I thought it would be fine, but no. Um, it turns out that there's a monitor that you could check. Now I'm an old pro. I know all the things. But after I've been waiting for a while, I texted Jim and said, could we make it 9:30? And he said, sure. And then I'm watching talk, time tick by, and we still haven't been called in. And so I finally go up to ask the gal. It's been over an hour, and I go ask the receptionist gal, who was not great. I don't know if she was new or shy or what, but today's receptionist was 1,000 times better. So I was like, okay, well, that was her and not me. Um, but when I go up to ask yesterday's receptionist if she thinks it's going to be a lot longer, she points to the monitor, which shows where I am in the queue. And she said, well, there's several people still ahead of you. And there were like 6 canines ahead of me. And they'd all been waiting. Those people had been waiting like 78 minutes, and I'd been waiting 67 minutes. And so I bailed. I took Killian home because, this had been going on for about 10 days anyway. So brought him home, went met Jim for coffee, and did it again today. Today I got there a little after 7:30. There was already one person ahead of me, but um, he got seen. The vet looked at him. They ended up keeping him. They have to put like little tubes to drain his ear. Poor guy. I was like, what is with me and vet expenses? Because earlier this week we had Jackson's teeth cleaned and a few extracted, and that was $1,700. And so now Killian gets to have his second surgery of his young life within a month, and they'll put little tubes in there that'll keep draining it. Because apparently, if they just drain the fluid, the vet said it only is like a 15% chance that it won't refill. Or it's only, yeah, I guess that's the same thing. 15% chance that it works. He says he's tried it and it just doesn't work very often. And so he recommended they put in these little tubes so it'll continuously drain. So I ended up leaving him there. They're going to do the procedure today. Maybe yesterday they were so barraged. I heard them like on the office intercom talking about triage. I heard triage a couple times, and I think it's never a good time when people use the word triage. So maybe they wouldn't have been able to keep him yesterday and do it. So they're going to do the procedure today. It's the same vet who did his neutering, did a great job. So I'm happy about that. And I walked out of there at 8:15. So it was like my brilliant plan of yesterday could have worked. Um, but alas. So if you're on video, you will see that I have my little thermos with, I love this thermos. It's got a little hummingbird on it. You all know how I love hummingbirds, and a coneflower, uh, different hummingbird on the back. I filled it up with my usual coffee because yesterday I went in thinking it was going to be fast and then I would be having coffee and brunch at 9. And I did not take my water. I did not take my coffee. So I was sitting there for like over an hour wondering why I felt so crappy, and then realized I've had no caffeine and I'm dehydrated, and it sucked. It just sucked. So today I took my thermos of coffee with me and I'm still drinking it. But it's nice and hot. This thing keeps it really nicely warm. So, yeah, so there's the saga of my life, none of which is writing related, but you all know that we have varying topics here at First Cup of Coffee. Um, I did get some edits back on Never the Roses, and there was a slight bit of confusion. So, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but I do want to share with you all because I try to be honest and everything. So like this is the thing, and people will complain about traditional publishing and dealing with editing, but frankly, editing is one of the things you are paying. I want to say paying for. It's one of the things you sign up for. It's one of the reasons you give them a portion of your royalties is to have a good editing team working with you. But it is an ongoing challenge as a creator. This never goes away. I have people ask me about this all the time. Like, how do you know which critiques to accept and which to reject? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just have to keep working on it and using your best judgment. So what had happened was at the beginning of the week, we got an email that editor Allie did have her baby. So she's out on parental leave now. So congratulations, Allie. That's just so wonderful. Everybody's healthy. So that's great. But on my favorite subject, me and my work, Allie did not get me the line edits that she had hoped to before the baby arrived, which is what I was afraid was going to happen. And I mean, this just happens. This is, editors are people just like writers are people. And that's the way it goes, right? So, so Deanna said that the assistant editor said that she would send me edits. And when we had the call last month, and I told you all about this call, the editorial call, Allie had said that she had gone over the developmental edits, my revisions to her developmental edits, and that it looked great, and she just would have some very light line edits. And I'd asked about my DNA, not DNA, which is what the transcript's going to try to make it, D and A, which is delivery and acceptance. So when you get a traditional publishing deal, they split it up and they give you a chunk when you sign. And then if it's a multi-book deal, like mine's a 2-book deal, they break that out into a chunk for the remaining books. So like for each book, when I turn them in, I get it's the delivery and acceptance. When I turn in the book and have done the revisions and they accept what I've done, then I get another chunk of money and I get another chunk on publication. So I had asked about Yeah, I mean, it's a delay, and that's the thing. It's frustrating that it's such a long delay. Um, Ellie wasn't feeling good with being pregnant, right? Which happens. And, you know, I and had not been able to go over my edits, had not been able to do the line edits. So even though I turned in my revision right before Christmas, it has been until now, right? And so when we were on the call, I asked about the D&A money, and Allie had said, let me get you these line edits. They'll be really light. Once we get those in, then I'll, put in for that next payment. And I said, great. Only now this is what's happened, right? So, but it's like, okay, Deanna's going to do it. Deanna's the assistant, and we'll get that done. So, Deanna sent me edits on Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. And said, and actually sent me an edit letter with some additional developmental edits, which I was not expecting because I thought we were done. And Deanna said, once I do those, which she felt like were very minor, and we'd already started talking about endorsement quotes, sending out, like the list of people, because she felt like it's in good enough shape that we could start getting endorsement quotes or blurbs on the for the galleys. So I mean, it's not like there's a lot to do, but Deanna had said, well, that here were some notes, an edit letter, and a few inline comments, and that then she would do a more intensive line edit. And reader, I freaked out a little bit. I freaked out. Uh, I was worried about there being these an intensive line edit, and she said it, and so that we could get it done by September. And I was like, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait until September for my D&A money. So, Agent Sarah, this is why having an agent is great. Every once in a while, people will ask me, and they're like, why bother having an agent when you can just have a lawyer go through your contracts? Well, and a good agent is your advocate, and a diplomatic advocate. And Sarah discussed with me and emailed Deanna and sort of explained the situation. And the great thing, and she suggested, could Deanna do her line edits along with the copy edits? So that's the great news. Deanna said yes. And so I'm just making these changes on this manuscript. The part of what I'm wrestling, though, is I don't agree with all of Deanna's edits. And this is part of life, too, as a creator. And I discussed with a couple of people, primarily with Kelly Robson, who is of course a great friend and also has good insight, because there's something in there that Deanna suggested that I change that feels like because it might make readers uncomfortable. And so I don't want to change it because I feel like it's there for a reason. And I went back and checked. I did a compare doc of the manuscript that Allie read and my revision of it that Deanna read. And there were, Allie did not call out what Deanna called out. There wasn't any change in there, if that makes sense. So I, it's a question because we do live in an era of, um, you know, traditional publishers are being careful. They don't want to have controversial things in the books. At the same time, this is something that needs to be in there. So Kelly and I discussed, and Kelly is like, don't change it. So I'm going to look at it and see if there's anything I can do to, I don't know, address it in any way. I was almost going to use the word soften, but I don't want to soften it either. Uh, so it can be a difficult thing because, like all things, it's a spectrum, right? So like at the far end, there is the no, it's my work and I will not change a thing, not even a single comma. And then there's all the way to the other end where, you become like was it the straw that broke the camel's back, the Aesop's fable, where, like you're trying to please everybody, and then you water it down and destroy it. Uh, to be perfectly clear, that's not what Deanna is asking me to do. Uh, but again, it's on the spectrum somewhere, right? Where I have to decide on what things is it worthwhile for me to dig in my heels, and on what things should I compromise because of like changing values, because I don't want to become like, oh, I won't even call out names, but certain older authors who are like, by gosh, this how I wrote things in my day, and I'm not going to change. I want to be current. I want to be sensitive to today's readers, but also stick to those things that I feel like are important and valuable. It's a fine line to walk. It's a dance. So that's what I'm dealing with. But I got through all of Deanna's in document comments yesterday. There were lots of nice things in there, so that was good. Um, there is this thing, though, that I know that people talk a whole lot these days about, like the compliment sandwich, which is where if you need to give someone some bad news or critique, you give them a compliment, give the critique, and then the compliment. Um, and I confess to being my cranky Gen X self on this kind of thing, where it's like, do we really need to sandwich every piece of critique between compliments? So I very much appreciate hearing uh, what works and what's great. And it's important. In fact, I was having a conversation at Nebula Conference about this, about critique groups, that it's important to tell people what worked about the story, because otherwise they'll go in and change it. If you don't say it's good, they'll think that it's not, and they'll change it. One gal was telling a story about like getting critique on a story, and she ended up saying to her group, well, is this even salvageable? And they were like, oh, of course it is. It's great. It's just these things. But like they neglected to tell her that. So there's obviously very important place for what I talk about as the language of praise, being able to find ways to talk about what works well. But when there's a lot of you know, it needs to be sincere. I think that's the thing that I find interesting about uh, the language of praise. And I'm wanting to backtrack now on the use of the word sincere, because I'm not don't mean that all praise or compliments is insincere, but if it's not grounded in something specific, it can come across sounding as flattery, right? And I had an editor once who would just, I mean, I would refer to it as blowing sunshine up my skirt. She would always tell me, oh, but your writing is just so beautiful. But it felt like she was managing me that way because, well, and I've told this story before. She made changes to my book and sent it on to production, telling me that, oh, I'd done such an amazing job and my writing was so beautiful, which thank you, but I'm also not perfect. Uh, that she had just sent it straight on to production for copy edits and proofing, and we could be done. Um, she had actually accepted her own. I've got my friend in production to send it to me because the editor would. She's like, "Oh, it's already gone." So I got one of the editors that I knew in production to send it to me and did a compare doc. If you don't know how to do a compare doc, it's really invaluable in these cases. And I looked to see what she had changed, and she had changed things in my manuscript, in my book, and accepted her own changes, uh, or never did track changes to begin with, which is just so unethical. It's so awful. Had I been doing this podcast, then you would have seen me foaming at the mouth. I could not believe it. And what was weird was she changed things wrong. and I know I've ranted about this before, but you get it again. Like I had a typo, right? A typo where I said her hand stung with splinters. Only I spelled it STUN, stun with splinters, and instead of stung with a G. And this editor changed it to stunned, STUNNED, stunned with splinters. So that was my social media status for a while, was stunned with splinters. So I went in and I rejected some of her changes. They were stupid changes. And but then they were very minimal. So why not send them back to me? It was just crazy. So there's my rant about editing. This one is going to be all's well that ends well. Deanna's paying a lot of attention to detail. She's caught a number of great important things. So yeah, gonna get that out, and I'm happy to be turning that back in. And then next phase will be some line and copy edits, and I'll be able to turn my attention to Reluctant Wizard. So that's like one of the things that's been hanging out there is going to be off my virtual desk. So with that said, I'm going to get to work. I hope you all have a fabulous Friday. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you all on Monday. You all take care. Bye bye.